not supposed to be green, like faith's not supposed to be seen. The sky's not supposed to touch the ground, and a square's not supposed to be round. The moon's not supposed to touch the sun, and a two is not supposed to be a one. And the heart's not supposed to weigh a ton, and forever's not supposed to be done. Winter's not supposed to come in June, and I am not supposed to have the blues. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, babe, except you and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, ooh, baby, yeah, except you and me. Night's not supposed to be long, yeah. No one is supposed to be alone. Understanding is not supposed to be confused, and the wind is not supposed to lose. Like fire's not supposed to freeze, or like joy is not supposed to grieve. Like you are not supposed to leave what I said I'm not supposed to mean. He is not supposed to have your heart. Baby, we are not supposed to be apart. There are so many things that are not supposed to be said. You and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be. Hey, baby, it seems just like no seasons changing, or this earth with no creation, or a heart with no feelings, or a sickness without a healing. Just like a frozen spring, or a bird with no wings. Just like a song out of key, that's how my life would be. Like the night skies with no stars, a lonely broken heart, no holding hands or walks in the park. That's how it would be if we were apart. Ooh. There are so many things, yeah, except love. So many things that are not supposed to be. It's like having nowhere to breathe. Like having no words to breathe. Like having no rain for the sea. There are so many things that's not supposed to be. Not supposed to be. Except you and me, baby. Yeah, yeah, baby, yeah, except you and me.
And I stayed in the song, so now I'm closer to God. But being closer is hard. The attacks get stronger, become much harder to fight, and they last longer. That's what it's always been. Joy with the pain, dark with the light, sun with the rain. With the right perspective, there can be something to gain.
Yo, can I with you? What?
ACT, did you see this?
Look, if it ain't official DanaJay, Levi for Kelly, or Prima Donna News, I don't even want to see it. Just take it off. Look, you got some weed? I gotta get some. All right, hurry up. Diesel and them here, everybody here, we waiting on you. All right.
But I know that there's more. More for you, more for us.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking the pandemic.
Say you love it, what you gon' do now? Hope you're ready, cause I'm really about to put it down. Girl, you know that I don't
What's going on? What's going on? I ain't gonna take up no more time for real. We going directly into it. Brace yourself. Brace yourself. Oh yeah. It's there. Oh, excuse me. We got 22 pages, y'all. Let's go. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? We got 22 pages. United States of America versus Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as R. Kelly. You see the way that they playing with him? They made him a corporation now. You see that? Defendant Robert Kelly's motion in response to the government's memorandum of law in opposition to defendant's motion for judgment of acquittal. Let's see what we're doing. You know what? Let's do this real quick. Let's move this up a little bit. Let's get out of here. Let's see. Table of authorities. Argument. The government failed to prove defendant guilty of the offense of racketeering count 1. You know what? Let me get out of this. Hold on. Let me get out of that. Let me get out of that. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Hold on. Let me get this out the way for y'all. Get that out the way for y'all. Bring that back. All right. A, B, C, and D. Production of sexually explicit material. Racketeers Act 2, 7, and 10. Mann Act violation, exposure to STDs. 8. Then you got A, B, C, D, and E in that. 3. Racketeering Act 5. Mann Act violation, Geronda. Racketeering Act 9. Jane. Forced labor. Racketeering Acts. Then you got the conclusion on 18. Then you got the table of contents. Then you got the cases. Good God Almighty. Jennifer ain't playing. Then you got the statues. Jeez. Here come Jenny from the block, y'all. Here come Jenny from the block. Let's go. The government failed to prove defendant guilty of the offense of racketeering count 1. A, where there was no common purpose to carry out a fraudulent course of conduct, the government did not establish an enterprise. The government concedes that its evidence did not prove that defendant's employees shared the common purpose of criminality, but contends that to demonstrate a RICO enterprise, it was only required to show that defendant's employees shared a common purpose to promote his music and meet his personal needs. Government responded at 49. Despite authority to the contrary, the government insists that to prove a RICO enterprise, the members of the enterprise need not have a connection to any unlawful conduct. Government response at 50. According to the government, so long as the persons associated in fact share a common purpose, a RICO enterprise may exist, even if those persons do not have a common understanding that the purpose of the enterprise is to carry out illegal or fraudulent conduct. Under the government's theory, an enterprise exists when any individual is engaged in a pattern of unlawful conduct, racketeering activities, and merely uses his employees to unwittingly facilitate that conduct. The government's argument is believed by the law and common sense. At the outset, the government is unable to provide a single case that supports its expansive view of a RICO enterprise, nor is it able to identify any factually similar authority. Instead, the government repeats the refrain that an enterprise may constitute a legal entity, but this point is not in dispute. An enterprise can be either a formal or informal organization that conducts purely illegal activity or conducts largely legal activity. Any union or group of individuals associated, in fact, can constitute an enterprise. 18 U.S.C. 1961-4. However, to sustain a charge of RICO, the members of the enterprise must share a purpose of carrying out some course of unlawful conduct. First Capital Asset Management, Inc. versus Satanwood, Inc. Okay? If this was not the case, a RICO enterprise could be established by one bad actor using his employees, his neighbors, or even his friends to unwittingly facilitate that misconduct. The framers of the RICO statute did not intend this absurd result, and courts have not hesitated to reject this expansive view of a RICO enterprise. Strangely, the government cites Moss versus BMO Harris Bank, NA 258 F Supplemental 3D 289 Eastern District of New York 2017 to support its argument. But Moss strongly supports defendant's position. There, the plaintiff brought a putative class action against First Premier Bank, FPB, alleging RICO violations, ID at 293. Specifically, the plaintiff charged that FPB, a formal legal entity, belonged to the Automated Clearinghouse, ACH, network, a payment processing system that processed unlawful ACH transactions on behalf of payday lenders, ID at 295. The plaintiff argued inter alia that the ACH network constituted an enterprise consisting of originators, various depository financial institutions that receive ACH transaction instructions, ACH operators, and third-party service providers, all of which shared the common lawful purpose of facilitating batch processing of electronic payments for and between participating depository financial institutions. ID at 299. The court concluded that the ACH network described by plaintiff did not constitute an enterprise for RICO purposes. The court held that to satisfy the first prong of the Boyle test, the participants in an association, in fact enterprise, must share a common purpose to engage in a particular fraudulent course of conduct and work together to achieve such purposes. Emphasis in the original. ID cited New York versus United Parcel Service, Inc., number 15 CV 1136 KBF, 2016 U.S. District Lexus 105038, Southern District of New York, August 9th, 2016, quoting First Capital Management 385 FD at 174. The court dismissed plaintiff's 1962A claim, finding that plaintiff's failure to plead an association, in fact, enterprise that shared a wrongful intent to violate RICO was fatal to the claim. Moss 258 F Supplemental 3D at 299. See also Cruz versus FX Direct Dealer LLC 720 F 3D 115 121 2D CIR 2013. Affirming dismissal of association, in fact, RICO claim where the amended complaint admitted that certain participants in the purported enterprise were not aware of deceptive practices at issue. First National Bank versus Gelt Funding Corporation 820 F Supplemental 8990 SDNY Southern District of New York 1933. Affirmation D 27F 3D 763 2D Circular 1994. The Moss Court expressly rejected the plaintiff's enterprise theory, finding it implausible that all of the institutions that allegedly made up the enterprise possess the unlawful intent required to transform that cooperative into an association, in fact, enterprise for RICO purposes. ID at 300. See also Anthill versus Alley Financial Inc. 998 F Supplemental 2D 127 SDNY 2014. Affirmed in part, revived in part, on other grounds sub norm. Bab versus Capital Source Inc. 588 FAPX 66 2D Circular 215, dismissing RICO claims that allege that defendants used the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, the MERS, to conceal unlawful mortgage transfers because plaintiff failed to show coordinated activity to jointly achieve a common fraudulent purpose. Emphasis in the original. Critically, the plaintiff and Moss argued that the defendant bank shared a common purpose of the ACH network and used the ACH network to originate lawful and legitimate transactions, but also used its role within the ACH network to participate in the collection of unlawful debts relying on Anthill Supra. The Moss Court observed that, at best, the defendant used a legitimate network to advance his own illegitimate businesses interests, and that the alleged illicit ACH transaction did not render the ACH network a RICO enterprise absent a common purpose among the other network participants to violate RICO ID. The Moss Court's logic applies with full force here. The government's evidence showed that defendant's so-called inner circle, more aptly described as his employees, worked to promote defendant's music and brand, a legitimate enterprise. At best, the government's evidence showed that the defendant used his role within his music-driven collective to participate in private sexual misconduct. As in Moss, defendant's use of his otherwise legitimate music business to advance his allegedly illegitimate sexual needs. Now, this where people are going to try to say, Jennifer Bonjean admitted. No. Look at what she said. She said defendant's use of his otherwise legitimate music business to advance his allegedly, here it is. She's not saying that he runs an illegitimate sexual needs. She's saying allegedly. That's what y'all saying. So she making fun of y'all and using y'all words against y'all. So don't come and say, oh, Jennifer Bonjean said that he run illegitimate stuff. No, the word allegedly is there. All right. So let's go there. Defendant's use of his otherwise legitimate music business to advance his allegedly illegitimate sexual needs does not render defendant's business organization a RICO enterprise, absent a common purpose among his employees to violate RICO. Thus, the government's RICO enterprise theory fails. Courts have rejected the government's expansive theory of a RICO enterprise because it would extend RICO liability to a vast marketplace based on one bad actor's mere association with the other members of that collective. Moss 258 F Supplemental 3D at 300 to 301. By way of example, under the government's theory, both Fox News and NBC News constitute RICO enterprises because of the bad conduct of Roger Ailes and Matt Lauer, respectively. Roger Ailes, the former CEO of Fox News, allegedly sexually harassed, inappropriately touched, and exposed himself to women, some as young as 16 years old, while working at Fox News. Under the government's expansive interpretation of enterprise, Fox News and his employees who worked for Ailes, his assistants, his secretaries, his drivers, etc., constitute an enterprise for RICO purposes because they presumably shared a common purpose to promote Fox News and meet the needs of its CEO. By the government's logic, of Ailes' assistants carried out tasks such as scheduling appointments, arranging transportation, or making lunch reservations for Ailes and women he harassed and or assaulted. Those assistants constitute members of a RICO enterprise, irrespective of their knowing involvement in Ailes' unlawful conduct. The same can be said for Matt Lauer, former NBC News anchor who was accused of repeatedly harassing and assaulting his female colleagues, sometimes while traveling for work, consistent with the government's theory any of Lao's assistants, handlers, drivers will qualify as members of an enterprise for RICO purposes if in the course of their duties they facilitated Lao's illegal sexual conduct, even unwittingly. Of course, the government has shown no willingness to use its aggressive RICO theory against powerful white men. Oh, she killing them. But the fact remains that if its RICO enterprise theory, in this case, is sanctioned, the government will have virtually unlimited power to charge a single bad actor with RICO. In sum, the government concedes that it failed to establish an enterprise when it offered no evidence that the defendant's various employees over the course of 2 decades engaged in coordinated activity to jointly achieve a common fraudulent purpose. As summarized by the government in its opposition papers, the evidence at trial showed only that defendant's employees genuinely engaged in a variety of tasks that supported defendant's relationships, not that they performed activities with the purpose of supporting illegal conduct. Because the government failed to prove that the members of defendant's so-called inner circle acted jointly to achieve a common fraudulent or illegal scheme, this court must acquit defendant of RICO. Then we go to B. The government's evidence of an enterprise distinct from the defendant was wanting. The government insists that its proof satisfied the person enterprise rule because the enterprise consisted of more than the defendant. The government's summary conclusions are not backed up by the evidence. The government argues that the purpose of the enterprise was to promote defendant, his music, and his brand, and to ensure that his needs were met. Illogically, the government argues that the enterprise was distinct from the defendant but fails to identify evidence to support his contention. Frankly, the government seems to concede that defendant is the enterprise and that the enterprise simply does not exist without him, which explains why it failed to charge even one other person in connection with the alleged vast RICO enterprise. The government offers only a feeble response to defendant's discreteness challenge, citing no authority to support its contention or distinguishing the holds of Riverwoods, Chapel Court versus Marine Midland Bank. And she did case law. She killed him with the case law by alleging a RICO enterprise that consists of defendant and his own employees, agents carrying on his affairs, namely promoting his brand, his music, and even facilitating his sexual needs. The government fails to satisfy the distinctness requirement. Put differently, because the government alleged that defendant's employees associated together for no purpose other than to carry out defendant's needs, including his sexual activity. The employees did not form an enterprise distinct from defendant. Defendant and the alleged enterprise were one and the same. Hold on. The government failed to prove that so-called enterprise activities affected interstate commerce. The government's interstate commerce arguments hinges on its theory that the purpose of the RICO enterprise was to promote defendant's music and brand. As argued, supra, this RICO enterprise theory fails because there is simply no nexus between this collective of individuals who work to promote defendant's music and a course of fraudulent conduct or the racketeering activity in which the defendant is alleged to have engaged. If defendants' legitimate music collective constituted an enterprise for RICO purposes, the government's argument would be well taken. But for the reasons identified, supra, the government cannot prove a RICO enterprise based on individuals associated, in fact, for the purpose of promoting defendant's music. The government's proof did not establish a pattern of racketeering. 1. Production of sexually explicit material. Racketeering Acts 2, 7, and 10. The government charged the defendant with 3 violations of 18 U.S.C. 2251A for allegedly videotaping a consensual sex act with a 17-year-old Stephanie, videotaping a sex act with a 17-year-old Jane in the state of California where the age of consent is 18, and videotaping sex act with Geronda in Illinois before she turned 18 years of age. The government argues that it provided sufficient proof of these 2251A violations because defendant used the minors to take part in sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of producing a visual depiction of that conduct. Government opposition at 62. She's using their words against him. The government argues that pursuant to authority in this circuit and others, proof that defendant photographed or videotaped the minor without more is sufficient evidence of a 2251A violation because videotaping the minor alone constitutes use of the minor. United States versus Serios 87, whatever that case law. Yeah. Although it is true that several circuits, including the Second Circuit, have held that he used element set forth in 2251A is satisfied when a defendant intentionally films a minor's sexually explicit conduct. Defendant maintains that use requires more than a minor appearing in a photograph or video. To reach a different conclusion would render the remaining terms in the statute persuade, induce, entice, or coerce. Like I said, superfluous. It is a cardinal principle of statutory construction that a statute ought upon a whole to be construed that if it can be prevented, no clause, sentence, or word shall be superfluous or insufficient. Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation versus EPA. Case law. See also Trusted Media Brands, another case law. If, as the government argues, a 2251A violation is established by nothing more than proving that a defendant photographed or videotaped a minor in sexually explicit conduct, the terms persuaded, induce, entice, or coerce are entirely unnecessary. To accept the Serios Court interpretation of the word use is to render the remainder of the sentence meaningless in direct contradiction to principles of statutory construction. To read the statute where each word has significance requires a court to define use as something more than the act of filming, photographing the minor. Defendant acknowledges the authority to the contrary, but maintains that the law is contrary to the intent of the framers of the statute. Number 2, Mann Act violations, exposure to STDs. A, Racketeering Acts 8A and 12A intent. In keeping with its dichotomous approach to statutory interpretation, the government argues that even though it charged Mann Act's violations based on defendants' violations of state public safety laws prohibiting knowing exposure to STDs, the government denies that it must prove that defendant arranged the travel of Jane and Faith with the intent to violate those laws. With no authority, the government argues that it was sufficient to show only that one of defendant's motivations in arranging for Jane and Faith to travel to meet him during his music tours was to have sex with them, not to violate the charged offenses. The government simply ignores its obligation to prove a nexus between the transportation and the alleged illegal conduct. This is a recurring pattern in the government's prosecution of this case. The illegal sexual activity the government charged are specific offenses pursuant to the California and New York public health codes. The record is devoid of any evidence that a significant or motivating purpose in arranging for Jane and Faith's travel was to expose them to an STD. The government devotes 6 pages of its discussion to reviewing the copious amount of testimony it presented in connection with defendants' alleged conduct of having unprotected sex with Jane and Faith. Whoever contracted genital herpes in any event, but none of this testimony demonstrates that defendant's actions of arranging for Jane and Faith to travel to meet him was motivated by an intent to expose Jane and Faith to STDs. That's the same thing that I said. I said the same thing, and some people was like, nah, that don't make sense. Okay, there it is again. The government continues to ignore the salient argument here, namely that it failed to show that defendant was motivated to have Jane and Faith travel to meet him so that he could expose them to an STD rather than to simply have sex with them. B. Racketeering Acts 8B and 12B. Persuasion, inducement, enticement, and coercion. The government continues to push a narrative it knows to be false. Namely, that defendant induced, enticed, coerced, and even persuaded Jane and Faith to travel to meet him in California and New York respectively, to engage in illegal sexual conduct. The undisputed evidence shows nothing of the sort. In both scenarios, defendant asked Jane and Faith to meet him at his concerts, and they accepted. Both young women were eager to meet defendant and did so with a clear understanding that it would likely involve sex. As set forth in detail in defendant's opening papers, Jane's contemporaneous text messages with her mother showed that Jane's mother engineered Jane's relationship with defendant. I'm going to pause right there and I'm going to leave that right there. I'm going to get some water. Hold on. Because I want y'all to see the water I go get. Pause right there. I just said something about that today. And they ain't want to talk about it. I told y'all, I know what I'm talking about. When I put stuff out there, I know what I'm talking about. I'm telling you, I know what I be talking about. Robert Keller, where you at? Look, y'all go get some moon jug water, y'all. It's blue. Man, go get some. Look at this. Look at this. You got to take the cap off. It got that little mini taste. Man, I'm telling you. Look. I'm telling y'all now. Go get the moon jug water, man. It's moon jug water. This one is called Money Moon. But, where is it? Yep. www.moonjug.com. Go get it, man. But they got tea and this the mint water right here. Whew. Good God Almighty. Let's get back into it. I got excited a little bit. Oak Cove, where you at? Y'all ain't want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. We ain't hiding, we ain't ducking and dodging. Oh, Robert's a pedophile. Oh, Robbie's this. Oh, Robbie's that. But as set forth in detail in defendant's opening papers, Jane's contemporaneous text messages with her mother show that Jane's mother engineered Jane's relationship with defendant. Oh, I guess R. Kelly made him do that too, huh? Things that make you go, now make that make sense. I guess R. Kelly made Jane do that too. I guess R. Kelly made Jane do that too, huh? I'm good now. Because as set forth in detail in defendant's opening papers, Jane's contemporaneous text messages with her mother show that Jane's mother engineered Jane's relationship with defendant. The text messages reflect that Jane and her mother communicated incessantly about how Jane could entice defendant into a relationship. I'm going to take it a step further. Now watch this. The text messages reflect that Jane and her mother communicated incessantly about how Jane could entice, coerce, induce the defendant into a relationship that Jane's mother hoped would catapult her into stardom. Prior to traveling to California, Jane's mother demanded that she continue to text defendant. And then she put it in there. You better be texting him so you will stay on his mind. Oh, wait a minute. You know what Oak Cove gonna say? R. Kelly made her do that. How? Jane dutifully reported to her mother that she had spoken to defendant about flying to California to meet him, and that defendant told her that she could meet him whenever I tell him tomorrow if I choose. As the government concedes, defendant had no idea that Jane was 17 years old. Since Jane and her parents actively misled defendant about her age during her trip to California, with defendant, Jane and her mother were in constant communication. Jane never once complained that she had been enticed on false pretenses or that she felt misled. I got my second win now. Let's go. Quote, quite the opposite. The text messages reflect that Jane was having the time of her life, okay, Asriel, and thrilled to be romantically connected to the defendant. Similarity, Faith's testimony on this issue shows that defendant asked her if she wanted to hang out. Faith agreed, and defendant merely paid for her travel. And the record is devoid, and any evidence of persuasion, enticement, or inducement, or the part of the defendant. Faith may have decided to travel or hang out with defendant because she sought to be near a celebrity. But this motivation on her part had nothing to do with defendant's conduct. Defendant's status as a famous R&B singer does not amount to enticement, notwithstanding the government's argument to the contrary. The government suggests that defendant's act of arranging for Jane's travel is sufficient to demonstrate that he induced her to travel to California. Is that right? Jennifer Bonjean, break it down. I gotta call you a black woman and a white body because he caused her to travel. The law says otherwise. The Second Circuit has made clear that terms persuade, induce, entice, and or coerce are words of common usage that have plain, ordinary meanings. United States versus Wigger. United States versus Gagalati. The court distinguishes this conduct from merely asking, which is not sufficient to demonstrate criminality, recognizing that there might be some uncertainty as to the precise demarcation between persuading, which is criminalized, and asking, which is not. Keeping with its pattern of rewriting statutes. Oh, government, why do you want to be so dirty? The government suggests that it need only prove that it need only to prove that defendant caused Jane and Faith to travel to meet him to sustain the charge. Is that right? Jennifer Bonjean, what else do the government rely on? The government relies on a 1959 case from the Fourth Circuit that interpreted the now defunct version of the Mann Act. Oh, is that so? That was historically used by the government to persecute black men who had relationships with white women. Harms versus United States. 272 F2D, you know the case law. Fourth Circuit, 1959. The current iteration of the Mann Act does not contain the cause language like the 1958 version did. Moreover, as discussed in detail, infra harms actually stands for the proposition that the government must provide specific proof of persuasion to sustain its burden. They can't do it. But the government also reliance on harms is misplaced. Contrary to the government's claim, it was required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that defendant persuaded, induced, or coerced Jane to travel to California, not merely acts. The government evidence was wanting. Thank you so much, Big Via Opinion. You know I'm trying to preach the best that I can with this R. Kelly thing. The court must acquit the defendant of this Mann Act violation and all others. Let's go to C. New York City Penal Law 120.20. Come on, black man, say it again. Come on, colored man, speak it over. The government charged defendant with a violation of the Mann Act as to Faith based on the theory that he committed the offense of reckless endangerment when he had unprotected sex with her in New York without disclosing he suffered from genital herpes. Let's go. The government again rehashes its excessive herpes testimony, insisting that a reasonable jury could easily conclude from the trial evidence that defendant created a substantial risk of physical injury. Wait a minute, stop there. Let me flip it down, put it in reverse. Tim Savage, what did you say? Faith Rogers, that bitch is lying, and she better go get some more proof. I could tell y'all that bitch is lying. Thank you, Tim. You just came over me for a second. Now let's go. Let's get on this horse and ride. A reasonable jury could easily conclude from that trial evidence that defendant created a substantial risk of physical injury when he had unprotected sex with Faith. Taking the government's evidence in its best light, it failed to prove that when defendant had sex with Faith, he created substantial risk of physical injury. First, because Faith was not afflicted with herpes and did not testify that she observed any evidence that defendant had an active infection. Oh, that kills you right there, Okof. Wait a minute. Let me reverse that. First, because Faith was not affected. Because Faith was not affected. First, because Faith was not affected. First, because Faith was not affected. First, because Faith was not affected. What you say? First, because Faith was not affected. That's not good enough for me. What did you say? First, because Faith was not affected with herpes.
What?
First, Faith was not affected with herpes and did not testify. Wait a minute. I thought she testified about that.
What?
She did not testify that she observed any evidence that defendant had an active infection. The only reasonable inference to draw is that defendant did not have any type of outbreak when he and Faith had sex in New York. So that means without an outbreak, nobody can have sex. And it goes to prove my theory, what I said before, how Faith had herpes back when she was 13. So how don't we know that she gave it to him? Oh, wait a minute. Water break. The government insists that its fact is irrelevant. But whether the defendant was engaging in unprotected sex while suffering, thank you again, Lavelle, while suffering from an active infection or during a period when he had no symptoms is entirely relevant to this state of mind and relevant to the issue of whether he acted recklessly. Surely the government would argue that it is more reckless and that and the risk of harm is more substantial if defendant had unprotected sex with Faith during an active outbreak. Thus, the question of whether Faith was infected with herpes in New York is relevant to defendant's state of mind and whether he acted with the requisite intent. Furthermore, the government's evidence simply did not prove to anybody that there was a substantial risk of death or serious physical harm. As argued at great length in defendant's opening memorandum of law, the government's herpes expert testified at length about rare complication of herpes. Okay, Robert Keller, listen. Maybe you will learn a little something, homeboy. But listen, the government's herpes expert testified at length. Not at shortness, not at medium, but at length about rare complications of herpes that arguably will qualify as serious physical injury. Thank you so much, Nell Taylor. But unless those risks were substantial, the government cannot meet its burden. Since the risk of serious physical injury associated with herpes is low rather than substantial risk, the government failed to prove reckless endangerment. Oh my God. I know the government's like, what do we do? What did we do? We ran up on a bully. But let's go here. D, New York Public Health Law 2307. For the reasons fleshed out in defendant's opening memorandum, the New York Public Health Law 2307 is unconstitutional.
Oh, yeah!
Inter alia. It fails to define infected.
What?
It fails to define infected. While the government and this court assumes that infected means carrying the virus rather than having the ability to transmit it, no authority supports this interpretation. Such an interpretation would lead to arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, as it did in this case. As a reminder, the government can point to no case in which an individual was charged with a violation of this public health law, where the accused did not even transmit a disease to the alleged victim.
You see something? Now you see now, you done fucked up, you know that, don't you?
I see
what I'm saying?
I thought.
No, so, you know what I'm saying? That you done fucked up now, you know that, don't you?
Yeah,
You know you done fucked up, don't you? You know it, don't you? No, you done fucked up.
Violation of California Health Safety Code 120290. I thank everybody that donated. I love that saying. If you see 10, drop 10 or donate 10. I love that so much. I'm going to follow suit on everybody page that donated. The government argues that it was permitted to charge defendant with a repealed statute and rewrite it so that it would pass constitutional muster. Unsurprisingly, the government has no authority to support its view that it can take up the role of the California legislator. For unknown reasons, the government relies on 1978 case out of the Third Circuit that fails to support its claim that it has the authority to charge and prosecute repealed statutes and to further step into the shoes of lawmakers, repeal statutes and to further step into the shoes of lawmakers and rewrite statutes to its liking. The government also inexplicably cites United States versus Bonjean. Whoa. Say that 3 times. Which is a case law, which considered whether a certain charge violated the ex post facto clause since the alleged conduct occurred prior to the enticement of the statute. The issue raised here is different. The question before this court is whether the government was permitted to charge a version of the statute that did not exist at the time of the prosecution. The United States Supreme Court answers that question in the negative. The government points this court to no competent authority demonstrating that the antiquated version of the California public health law may be kept alive. As such, the government had no authority to charge and prosecute defendant under a repealed and inoperative statute, United States versus Chambers. Racketeering Act 5, Mann Act violation, Geronda. Uh-oh, strap up. This why she don't want to go to Chicago. I knew it was coming. This why she didn't want to go to Chicago. Hey, Pastor Kobe, tell me what you feel about Geronda.
See, the devil busy. See, the devil won't act stupid. But I buy. Ooh, he got time.
All right. The government expressed some confusion over defendant's interstate commerce argument. To be clear, defendant did expressly argue that purely interstate use of cell phones does not constitute use of a facility of interstate commerce. Defendant did more than vaguely suggest this argument, as the government contends in footnote 28. Defendant cited authority to support the proposition, namely Gonzalez versus Raich, 545 U.S. 12005, and further acknowledged a Second Circuit cause that arguably conflicts with Gonzalez. The issue is properly preserved and presented to this court. If the court would like additional briefing on this issue or the many others raised in defendant's Rule 29 motion, it certainly has the authority to order it. Thank you, Ms. Josine. Ms. Bonjean, killing with it, killing with kindness. If it wasn't clear enough, defendant argued in the alternative that even if interstate cell phone use does satisfy the Commerce Clause requirement in some circumstances, it did not. In my Jocelyn voice, it did not, Stevie, it did not do so here. The government showed only that Geronda and the defendant sometimes communicated by cell phone. The date, here we go, the date and nature of those communications are unknown. The government asked the jury to assume the defendant induced, persuaded, enticed, or coerced Geronda to engage and prohibited sexual activity during their cell phone communications without providing the communications or even eliciting testimony from Geronda about what the communications reflected. Oh, are we hearing this again? That the government is making up stuff just by what other people said? Didn't Azriel say, no, I didn't say that. Y'all said that. On stand? Uh-oh. Excuse me. Now we see Ms. Bonjean saying the same thing about Geronda. Things that make you go, The government routinely attempts to avoid nexus requirements and must be reminded that the government was required to show that defendant used the cell phone to commit the specific prohibited act, namely to induce, persuade, or coerce Geronda to engage in unlawful sexual behavior. The government cannot satisfy that burden by genuinely showing that defendant and Geronda sometimes communicated by cell phone, and that on some unrelated occasion, they engaged in unlawful sexual activity. The language used in those communications, to the extent they existed, is important for determining whether the defendant induced, persuaded, enticed, or coerced, or merely asked Geronda, which would be sufficient to demonstrate criminality. United States versus Wager and United States versus Gagliata. While the government cites some authority to support its constitution that interstate commerce can be established by interstate cell phone use, none of the cases cited by the government condone asking a jury to assume the content of those communications as the government did here. In United States versus Vickers, which is case law, the defendant was charged with a 2242A violation, not a violation under 2242B. The Vickers Court was never faced with the question of whether the government can satisfy its burden of proof without ever introducing the communications that it claimed constituted persuasion, inducement, or coercion. Nor was the Vickers Court faced with any interstate commerce question. Acknowledging the problems with its proof, the government relies on Bloomfield versus United States, Eighth Circuit, a 60-year-old case out of the Eighth Circuit that interpreted at the repealed and outdated Mann Act statute. That aside, Bloomfield involved a defendant arranging from a prostitute, Miss Tolleferson, to cross state lines for the purpose of prostitution, where the evidence showed that defendant telephoned Miss Tolleferson for the precise purpose of hiring her to cross state lines and engage in prostitution in exchange for money. It is no surprise that a jury concluded that the defendant used the telephone to induce Miss Tolleferson across state lines for prostitution. In contrast, here, Geronda, I'm feeling tuning back up, testified that she had a sexual relationship with defendant that was carried out entirely in the state of Illinois. Didn't I tell you jurisdiction was going to play a part? I told y'all jurisdiction was going to play a part, right? I said Greenberg should have argued jurisdiction from the beginning and this wouldn't have been in New York. I said that, right? Now let's go here. In contrast here, Geronda testified that she had a sexual relationship with defendant that was carried out entirely where? Not in New York, but in the state of Illinois. She did not describe herself as a prostitute and admitted that she went to parties at defendant's home, hung out there for extended periods of time, and even went to defendant's home when he was not there. Although the government offered general evidence through Geronda's testimony that Geronda and defendant sometimes communicated by cell phone, it simply failed to prove that defendant used the cell phone to persuade, induce, or coerce Geronda into unlawful sexual activity. The government's proofs were insufficient as to Racketeering Act 5. Let's go. Racketeering Act 9, Jane, number 4. If you need to go get some water, go get some water. Because I'm ready to tune up and turn this thing in. Let's go. Let's get it in. I got both sets of water. I got the mint. Oh my God, this thing is so good. Oh, Jesus. Praise the Lord. I'm feeling it today. Hold on. Let me get some music in here. Oh yeah. Let's get some music in here. Let's see.
Listen, I don't even want to sing this song. Matter of fact, I just want to harmonize. I'm not talking notes. What I'm gonna be saying is the realest. Listen. First, I pop open a can of Red Bull, then I mix it with some Belgian all over you. Once I get your heart tweaking, girl, drop to my knees and then we'll see on this mission to try to break out all the candles feel the scratching up.
Said you. And you. Oh, and you. Son of a bitch. Geronda Captain. Let's go. Son of a bitch. Go get your water. And you know your sex is good when you know your sex is good when you. And you know your sex is good when you're. Son of a bitch. Ooh. Son of a bitch. Kels! I'm holding him down until he come home and give y'all a live joint. Kels! Let's go. Racketeering Act 9, Jane. In response to defendant's claim that the government failed to prove that defendant took any action to induce, persuade, entice, or coerce Jane to travel to California between September and October 2015. The government again relies on the pitiful 1959 Fourth Circuit case Harm versus United States Supra, claiming that inducement simply means to cause harm does not stand for the proposition the government contends. Indeed, harm supports defendant's arguments. And harms, the question at issue was whether the government proved that the defendant directed or knew that the victim would travel by common carrier. The defendant had previously worked for the defendant as a prostitute, and after having a conversation with the defendant, she traveled across state lines by interstate airline carrier, and thereafter engaged in acts of prostitution and establishments maintained by the defendant. ID at 480. Evidence that the defendant had induced the victim to travel for the purpose of prostitution was ample. However, the defendant argued that the government's evidence was insufficient to show that the defendant either directed or knew that the victim would travel by common carrier. The Fourth Circuit concluded that it was not essential for the government to show that the defendant directed or knew that the victim would travel by interstate carrier. The court reasoned that because the government proved inducement and the fact of the resultant trip by interstate carrier was sufficient to justify a conviction under 2422. The court held it was not necessary for the government to go further and attempt to show that harms the defendant knowingly caused the victim to travel by common carrier, either by direction or knowledge that the victim, Bruno, would use that mode of transportation. Cause is a word of very broad importance, and its meaning is generally known. The knowing persuasion to make the interstate trip, of course, must be shown with some degree of particularity. But once the knowing of persuasion has been shown, if the trip by interstate carrier follows, the offense is complete. ID at 481, emphasis added. Contrary to the government's argument, harms does not hold that endowment, or persuasion means cause. Quite the contrary, harms makes clear the government must show persuasion to make the trip with some degree of particularity. The court merely noted that once the government proves persuasion, it is not required to separately show that the defendant knew how the victim would travel across the state lines. Here, the government did not demonstrate persuasion, inducement, or coercion. Jane offered no testimony, no she didn't, to suggest that she was coerced or enticed into traveling to California in fall 2015. The record shows that Jane was desperate to return to defendant after he sent her home and was eager to travel with him. Jane's testimony about defendant rules and sexual proclivities during this time period are not sufficient evidence of coercion to travel, even if Jane now believes, with the benefit of hindsight, that defendant's conduct was controlling. Here we go, forced labor, racketeering acts. The government contends that Geronda's act of giving oral sex to defendant on one occasion in January 2010 was an act of forced labor. As set forth in detail in defendant's opening memorandum of law, the forced labor statute was not intended to punish isolated acts of abuse. But even if it was, the government did not show a nexus between the physical assault and the sexual act. Taken in its best light, the government offered evidence that on one occasion, Geronda threatened to punish evidence that on one occasion, Geronda threatened to punish Geronda for breaking into his home and physically assaulted her on a separate occasion because she failed to show him proper respect. Geronda did not testify that the physical assault was intended to force her to perform oral sex on defendant. This evidence falls painfully short of proof of the offense of forced labor. Geronda could have testified that she gave defendant oral sex because he threatened her or because she feared he might assault her, but those words never came out of her mouth. Random acts of violence plus a sex act does not equate to forced labor. The government should not be permitted to warp statutes beyond recognition simply because it seeks to punish isolated acts of abuse that occurred decades ago. Similarity. The government did not prove that Jane engaged in group sex acts because she was forced to. Jane's hindsight testimony that she did not want to participate in that conduct is not proof that she was forced to. The government cannot establish the offense of forced labor by simply showing that the defendant and Jane had a sexual relationship that some might consider abusive. The government was required to establish a casual link between the group sex acts and threats of physical violence. It failed to do so. Finally, no rational juror could conclude based on the evidence adduced at trial that defendant knowingly obtained or agreed to obtain any labor or services from Faith on January 13, 2018. As discussed supra, the forced labor statute was not intended to reach isolated conduct like that described by Faith. Faith never testified. Faith never testified that she felt forced to perform oral sex on a defendant. No, she didn't. Not wanting to have oral sex is not the same as being forced to engage in it. Furthermore, Faith admitted proudly that she was not a victim and made a choice to be involved with the defendant. When she was displeased with the relationship, she walked away. The government's infantilization of Faith and quest to redefine her experience as forced labor is offensive to women who actually live in conditions of servitude. I'm gonna read it again. The government's infantilizations of Faith and quest to redefine her experience as forced labor is offensive to women who actually live in conditions of servitude. The harm that the forced labor statute was designed to address. For the foregoing reasons, this court must acquit the defendant of all forced labor convictions. Conclusion. For the foregoing reasons, this court should enter an order acquitting defendant of all offenses. Respectfully submitted, Ms. Jennifer, the GOAT, Bonjean.
On the ground, and then I woke up as a well in the middle of a pond. And the minute I opened my mouth and started to sing, that changed everything. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I don't know just how I got here, just how I made it, just how I made it, just how I made it here. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I think about it every night and day. Spread my wings and fly away. Coming up in the hood, I saw so many things. Those so many things brought me all of my dreams. And now here I am today. I'm just saying. My God. My God. My God. Oh my God. Oh my God. That shows right there that Robert Kelly was never legitly found guilty. That goes to show that the government went with what they had, and they forced, along with Ann Donnelly, forced them folks to get a guilty conviction. Ben said, having phone sex with minors is statutory rape. Sylvia did it. Oh my God. Oh my God. Free Robert the fast way. That's facts. But why they don't understand and why they don't address the government, like Prima Donna said, why they don't address the government putting these people out as prostitutes? Why Sylvia don't get charged with tampering with a federal witness? With 2 federal witnesses. And tampering with a case in a federal court. That part right there, R. Kelly was not proven guilty in the court of law. He was found guilty by a biased jury of his peers that admittedly had preconceived notions. Facts. Facts. What you going to do when they come for all lies? I see you, Dell. Oh, man. I just want to see y'all comments, bro, that part. Lifetime Network, guilty of blasphemous news. Fake news, right? RSK coming home soon. Facts. Ralph say that, yep. Free Robert the fast way. Yes, Willie, he is. Alizar Ben Israel, you clowning tonight. He clown every night. That's what he do. Sony paid them allegedly. Okay. The time in this entire show is running out. Facts. R. Kelly coming home. Facts. Yes, free R. Kelly now. Yes, free R. Kelly like 3 years ago. And I know some people on Facebook that don't like me. Oh, Lord. Hold on. I just got word something going on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Because we going to watch it. Robert Kelly, you on the clock. Hold on. No, you won't.
enterprise may constitute a legal entity. But at this point, this point is not in dispute. An enterprise can be either formal or in an informal organization that conducts purely illegal activity or largely legal activity. Any union or group of individuals associated, in fact, can constitute an enterprise. However, to sustain a charge of RICO, the members of the enterprise must share the purpose of carrying out some course of unlawful conduct. If this was not the case, a RICO enterprise could be established by one bad actor using his employees or even his neighbors or even his friends to unwittingly facilitate that conduct. The framers of the RICO statute did not intend this absurd result, and courts have not hesitated to reject this expansive view of the RICO enterprise. Strangely, the government cites Moss versus BMO Harris Bank to support this argument. But Moss strongly supports defendant's position. There, the plaintiff brought a punitive class action against the First Premier Bank alleging RICO violations. Specifically, the plaintiff charged that FBPB, a formal legal entity, belonged to the Automated Clearinghouse Network, a payment processing system, that process unlawful transactions on behalf of payday lenders. The plaintiff argued that the ACH network constituted an enterprise consisting of originators, various depository financial institutions that received ACH transaction instructions, ACH operators, third-party service providers, all of which shared the common lawful purpose of facilitating batch process of electronic payments for and between participating depository financial institutions. The court concluded that the ACH network described by the plaintiff did not constitute an enterprise for RICO purposes. The court held that to satisfy the first prong of the Boyle test, the participants and associates of enterprise must share a common purpose to engage in particularly fraudulent course of conduct and work together to achieve these purposes. The court dismissed plaintiff's claims, finding plaintiff's failure
we about to go back in, y'all.
An association, in fact, enterprise
we about to go back in.
Shared
Something else dropped
to violate RICO was fatal to the claim. Okay, so with that being said, guys, what he's saying is that, and he brings up, listen, when you do these arguments, you have to bring up several other cases and several examples so that the court can understand why you're making these arguments, okay? So what he's saying in this argument is that there was a case just like this. It involved several processors, several people that worked in the banks, several different third-party processing companies, that if this person, the originator, right, set up a fraudulent system, that all of those people involved would have made it a RICO act because they had one common goal together, which was to carry out unlawful shit together. This is not what happened the court dismissed the plaintiff's claims because they did not know that they were processing payments fraudulently from these payday loan people. They have to have knowledge that this is what they're doing. And so, and not only do they have to have knowledge, they have to have intent that they're moving towards doing illegal activity together and doing business for the purpose of doing that illegal activity. And that's not what happened with R. Kelly. As a matter of fact, what happened with R. Kelly is that a lot of the employees spoke against his behavior. And so that right there already is, that's already not.
And we about to go back in.
An enterprise that is, that would statute.
Here we go.
Okay. The Moss Court's logic applies.
We about to go back in. Here we go. Here we go. I don't know what's going on with us. We about to go back in. I thought my day was over. I thought my day was over. Guess what? Oh, no, it's not. I'm going to ask y'all. Do y'all want to go home now? Or do y'all want to wait? Do y'all want to wait till the morning? Or do y'all want to get this work right now? If y'all want these next 9 pages, I need to see at least 5 hell yeahs in the chat. I'm telling you, it's coming down either tonight or tomorrow morning. If y'all want these next 9 pages, I want a hell yeah in the chat. If I don't get at least 5, I'm shutting it down right now. I'm telling you. I'm shutting it down right now. I'm going to tell you where it's going to go. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this.
Ooh, but my body's a mess, baby. I don't want to hurt nobody, but there is something that I must confess. Yeah,
I got 115 in the chat and 60 likes. I ain't moving until I get 40 more likes. I ain't moving until I get 40 more likes. And it's showing you that I got it ready to go. I ain't moving until I get 40 more likes. Let's go. Let's go. 117 watching and 60 likes. Man, get the hell out of here. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Jennifer Bonjean kicking their assets. Hold on. In my Levi voice. Hold on, nephew. In my Levi voice. Hold on. Jennifer Bonjean said, who's bad? Boom, doom, 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 doom. Government, your bud is mine. And those the right. And show yourself in broad daylight. Y'all incompetent to respond to me. Tell you what, you surely see. Come on. Come on, come on. Come on, Lee. Come on. Come on, let's go. If anything else drop, I'm there. That's there. That's there. Let's go. Thank you, Big Vi. Thank everybody that's been donating. I appreciate all of y'all. Trust and believe that. Let's go. Let's go. I got 72. I need 30 more likes. 117 and 116 in the chat and 72 likes. It ain't gonna work. I need 100 likes. I need 100 likes. I am amped up. This water is crazy. I need 30 more likes. Come on, give me 30 more likes, Lee. 30 more likes. I need 30 more likes, Lee. 30 more likes. Come on, I need 30. Man, you know what? You know what I'm gonna do? Okay. Y'all wanna play? Okay. You wanna play rough? Okay, let's play rough. Say hello to my little friend. Oh, Kelly, what up? I need you to sing a song for me. I need that song to give me something with feeling. Cause I got the feeling. Got the feeling. I got the feeling. I want a remix. Give me a remix, R. Kelly. I got you. Thank you so much, Nikki M.
Let me turn this car around. Something don't feel right.
She wasn't supposed to find out about our love affair.
Y'all know who y'all are. If you ain't hit that like button coming in, hit that mother going out.
Like this, that's my word. I swear I'd take it back if I could to keep from hurting her. How could I be so stupid? To think that I could bring somebody in our home. The way we sleeping around without you finding out. If I don't get another chance, girl, I understand because I sent you off to be with her.
And you made a U-turn. You made a U-turn.
You thought that I would be gone for a while.
You made a U-turn. You made a U-turn.
She slipped through the back door, checked out the window, and then got in bed with her. And
you made a U-turn. Oh, people left because I'm asking for likes. Cool. I got 110. Give me 20 more likes. We gone.
I was only stupid for thinking you would do this to me when I'm gone.
You get me to 90, we taking flight.
When I am coming home, but I know you're not alone, so I left the house with Stacy.
10 more.
Said I was going to Macy's. You gave me your credit card, blew a kiss and said bye, baby. You said buy what I want and buy something nice for Stacy, and you don't like Stacy, so I knew something was crazy. You sent me up to be with her,
but you made a U-turn. You made a U-turn.
Yes, I did.
I thought that you would be gone for a while.
You made a U-turn. You made a U-turn.
She slipped through the back door, you checked out the window, and then got in bed with her.
What? Nothing in the water. It was. It alkalizes the body, oxygenates the cell, oxygenates the cells, increases hemoglobin, cleans blood and colon,
Sometimes I lie just to
and it
get
chelate
you out
heavy
of
metals.
the studio. What? And she would be down there stripping for me in the studio.
Oh no,
It's real water.
but why'd you do this, Kelly? You said you loved me, but how could you hurt me?
Oh, somebody took a like away? Okay.
You thought I'd be gone.
I need 8 more.
For a while.
You made a U-turn. You made a U-turn. I need 8 more likes. So somebody took their like away.
Emotional.
Your emotional kills. Now let me hear the joint by yourself. Let me hear it by yourself. I need 5 more. You know what? I'm gonna show y'all how I feel.
She wasn't supposed to find out about our love affair.
What?
The plan was not for her to walk right in on both of us. I did not plan for things to go down like this, that's my word. I swear I'd take it back if I could to keep from hurting her.
Let's go.
How could I be so stupid to think that I could bring somebody in our home?
3 more.
Around without you finding out. If I don't get another chance, girl, I understand because I sent you off to be with her.
That pump, Lamarcus. Hey, Mel J. 2 more.
I thought that you would be gone for a while,
but you made a U-turn.
You made a U-turn.
Thank you, J Rock.
She slipped through the back door, I checked out the window, and then got in bed with
Government boy, you in trouble. You in trouble. 89. I'm gonna do this for y'all. If you like it, put the blue hearts up in the chat.
I feel like taking a dip in your pool.
If you like this song, put the blue hearts in the chat.
Relax a bit, you know what I mean?
I'm at 90, we going after this.
Sip on a little of Patron.
Hey, 120. Hit them likes coming in. I really appreciate it. Hey! Swimming in you.
Swimming in you. Hey, little mama.
Hey, your boy on the track.
Dip in your pool. Just go for a little dive, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's go. Hey. I bet you don't know who produced this. I love it, I love it. I bet y'all can't tell me who produced this. Hey, Rob, come on home so we can finish this off. Swimming in you. Talks about all my troubles, no, Lord. I just want to know, baby, how you feel. Something going on.
Swimming in you. Hey, little mama. Said I wanna take a dip in your pool. Just go for a little dive, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the extra like. I appreciate y'all. But until my boy come home, I'm gonna be forever saying, free cows, yeah? Whoa! I will live, eat, breathe, sleep, saying, bring R. Kelly home. Bring Robert home. They lied. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Let's go. Defendant Robert Kelly's reply to government's memorandum of law in opposition to his motion for a new trial by Jennifer Bonjean. Let's go. Defendant was denied effective counsel where his trial attorneys failed to conduct a meaningful voir dire of potential jurors and challenge unqualified jurors, some of whom had watched the inflammatory docuseries Surviving R. Kelly or were familiar with prior accusations of sexual abuse of minors against defendant. Counsel's objectively unreasonably performance during voir dire resulted in the impaneling of a jury that was neither fair nor impartial in violation of defendant's due process guarantees. The government defends trial counsel's performance during voir dire, claiming that defendant's complaints are vague and belied by the record. Specifically, the government vouches for counsel performance, arguing that trial counsel actively participated in voir dire. The fact that defense counsel participated in voir dire does not mean that his performance was objectively reasonably, where he agreed to the seating of multiple jurors who, 1, had seen Surviving R. Kelly, 2, were aware of defendant's reputation that he loves little girls, and 3, were familiar with his prior legal troubles, including his criminal prosecution for creating sexually explicit videos with a minor. Had there been even one juror who had seen Surviving R. Kelly seated on defendant's jury, his jury could not be deemed impartial. Incredibly, defendant's jury was compromised of 2 people, jurors 3 and 5, who watched Surviving R. Kelly, and numerous others who were fully aware of accusations against defendant for sexually abusing minors. Defendant contends that fully half of his jurors should have been disqualified for cause. Trial counsel did not move for any of them to be disqualified for cause and did exercise any preemptory challenges against them. The government minimizes the extraordinary prejudice that defendants suffered when at least 2 seated jurors had watched Surviving R. Kelly. The government even claims that there was something strategic about trial counsel's decision to seat these jurors. The argument is nothing short of absurd. This court need only watch the embedded sample clips of Surviving R. Kelly to conclude that no possible trial strategy exists for failing to move to disqualify jurors 3 and 5 for cause. The government's efforts at constructing a trial strategy are unpersuasive. Surviving R. Kelly is a docuseries consisting of 11 episodes that graphically detail claims of sexual abuse against the defendant by numerous women. Some of the information communicated in the docuseries was presented at defendant's trial, but much of it was not. Indeed, the docuseries highlights the stories of scores of women who claim to have been victims of sexual abuse and offers no countervailing viewpoint. A large part of the documentary details defendant's prior criminal case and that involved allegations of sexual abuse of a 14-year-old, which included allegations that he videotaped himself urinating on the 14-year-old. It was nothing short of mind-blowing that defense counsel acquiesced to the seating, acquiesced to the seating of jurors who came to the case with this highly prejudicial, with this highly prejudicial information that no human being could have put aside. Trial counsel's decision to seat these jurors is particularly troublesome, where there was simply no reason to do so. Although the documentary was popular, it would not have been difficult to impanel a jury that did not include individuals who had seen the docuseries. Moreover, there is little doubt that this court could have granted defense counsel motions for, and then it have YouTube links. It have 3 YouTube links. Surviving R. Kelly can be live streamed on several platforms, including Netflix and Amazon Prime. Defendant is unable to attach the docuseries to his pleading without violating copyright laws, but refers this court to the docuseries and relies on the full docuseries in support of this claim. The YouTube links provided in footnote 1 is a small fraction of the type of information at least 2 jurors possess prior to being seated as jurors. Oh my God. Cause to disqualify any jurors who had seen the docuseries or were familiar with his prior criminal prosecution, probably with no objection from the government had defense counsel simply asked. Defendant contends that counsel's on-the-record performance is objectively unreasonable where no possible trial strategy exists for loading the jury up with people who were exposed to undeniably prejudicial bad act evidence, much of which would not have been admissible at trial. To the extent that the government extends that the defendant himself agreed to seating these jurors, it is dead wrong. As set forth in the attached declaration, defendant was provided no opportunity to review the juror questionnaires prior to trial and considered himself a bystander during the critical stage of trial. Declaration of Robert S. Kelly. Defendant explains that he played no meaningful role in the jury selection process, and that when he attempted to assert himself and express his concerns about jurors who had watched the docuseries, his concerns were dismissed. Indeed. Defendant had no idea that at least 2 jurors who decided his guilt had watched the documentary. Defendant declares that he did not consent to the seating of jurors who saw Surviving R. Kelly. Or those who had knowledge about prior allegations of sexual abuse against him. The government argues that defendant cannot demonstrate prejudice because he cannot show that any juror had actual bias. The argument does not pass the laugh test, according to the government. Actual bias is bias in fact. The existence of a state of mind that leads to an inference that the person will not act with entire impartiality. This record demonstrates that before stepping into the courtroom, 2 jurors heard over 360 minutes of victim testimonies, including graphic accounts of urinating on 14-year-olds. If this type of information does not lead to the inference that a person will not and cannot act with impartiality, it is difficult to imagine what would. A whopping 6 jurors were familiar with allegations that defendant had previously sexually abused minors and had faced legal consequences for each conduct. The government attempts to trivialize the prejudice to defendant, but it is simply beyond debate that defendant jurors suffered from actual bias. Frankly, even if defendant cannot show actual bias, bias should be presumed here. The United States Supreme Court has observed a fair trial and a fair tribunal. Here we go. There it is. There's your third court, y'all. a fair trial and a fair tribunal. So now I'm going to give you the three courts. Superior, Supreme, and Military Tribunal. Superior is a branch of district court. Supreme oversees district court. Military Tribunal oversees all of them. That's where your presidents and everybody get tried at court at. And you can't try a president in a superior or supreme court. So now you know. That's your three courts. A fair and trial and a fair tribunal is a basic requirement of due process. Fairness, of course, requires an absence of actual bias in the trial of cases. But our system of law has always endeavored to prevent even the probability of unfairness. To perform its high function in the best way, justice must testify an appearance of justice. Estes versus Texas. A Chief Justice Taft said in Turney versus Ohio. The requirement of due process of law and judicial procedures is not satisfied by the argument that men of the highest honor and the greatest self-sacrifice could carry it on without danger of injustice. Every procedure which would offer a possible temptation to the average man to forget the burden of proof required to convict the defendant, of which might lead him not to hold the balance nice, clear and true between the state and the accused, denies the latter due process of law. ID at 532. Indeed, the United States Supreme Court has struck down convictions irrespective of a showing of actual bias where prejudice is inherent in those convictions. C.E.G. Radu versus Louisiana, 373 U.S. 723, 1963. Turner versus Louisiana, 379 U.S. 466, 1965. This is a case where prejudice is inherent in defendant's convictions because fully half of his jury was exposed to highly prejudicial and inadmissible evidence that invariably interfered with defendant's cherishable constitutional safeguards. In the old but highly instructive case of Marshall versus United States, 360 U.S. 310, 1959, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed a defendant's drug conviction after concluding that exposure of some of the jurors to newspaper articles was so prejudicial to justify a new trial. During the defendant's trial, 2 newspaper articles got before the substantial number of jurors, ID at 311. The news accounts contained information that the defendant had 2 previous felony convictions and detailed the circumstances of prior arrests and convictions. ID upon learning that the news accounts had reached the jurors. The trial judge questioned the jurors about whether they had seen the articles. ID at 312. 7 of the jurors had some exposure to the articles, but all assured the trial judge that they would not be influenced by the news articles and could decide the case on the evidence in the record. The trial judge denied the defendant's motion for a mistrial, finding that there was no prejudice to the defendant. The United States Supreme Court reversed finding. We have here the exposure of jurors to information of a character which the trial judge ruled was so prejudicial that it could not be directly offered as evidence. The prejudice to the defendant is almost certain to be as great when that evidence reaches the jury through news accounts as when it is part of the prosecution's evidence. It may need be greater, for it is then not tempered by protective procedures. ID at 312 through 313. Consistent with the teachings of Marshall, defendant is entitled to a new trial. half of his jurors were exposed to information of a character that was so prejudicial that it could not be offered into evidence. Indeed, had trial counsel simply moved to disqualify these jurors, it seems likely that those motions for cause would have been allowed. Prejudice to the defendant must be presumed given the inflammatory nature of the information that no average human could put aside. Defendant's convictions must be vacated and a new trial ordered. 2. Defendant is entitled to a new trial where one of his trial attorneys labored under disabling conflict of interest as a result of her simultaneously representation of the defendant and the government star witness Jenn that was imputed to the entire defense team. Defendant rests largely on his arguments contained in his opening memorandum of law. Defendant was denied his constitutional guarantee of conflict-free counsel when his attorney labored under a conflict of interest based on her simultaneously representation of defendant and government witnesses Jenn. Trial counsel further suffered from a Fulton conflict. Neither of these conflicts were waivable. In light of the foregoing, defendant's conviction must be vacated and a new trial ordered. Date April the 4th, 2022, New York, New York. Respectfully submitted, Jennifer Bonjean. Whoa. 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 She ain't playing. She ain't playing. She ain't playing. She ain't playing at all. Only thing I can say is this right here. Oh!
She's everything to me. There ain't nothing she won't do for me. And every man wants a girl like her.
Whew. It kind of hit home. I'm just saying, it kind of touched me a little bit. Let's go back to it. Oh!
She's everything
Facts,
to me.
J-Rock.
There ain't
if you destroy the image, you will break the enemy. That's facts.
And every man wants a girl like her. No price compares to what she's worth. She saved my life in so many ways. Cause when darkness comes, she's my break of day.
I thank y'all for the 101
and I know
likes.
I'm blessed with what I got. Yeah. But still I can't seem to tie that knot. Somebody help me. How do I tell my girl that something came up in the plans has changed? How do I tell my girl that I'm not gonna be able to make it, I'm going away? Tell me how do I tell my girl that I'm sorry baby but I just can't? Tell me how do I look her in her face and have the nerve to say that I'm not ready on our wedding day. Now we have both been together.
What up, Lee?
Since our roaring high school days.
Read, nigga, read. Come on. Y'all know how we do it.
Stormy weather, and we have both shared each other's pain. No one could ever come between us two. And I bet my breath that things would never ever change. Now this world of marriage we vowed to, all of a sudden seems so strange.
Thank y'all so much.
Help me, yeah. How do I tell my girl that something came up in the plans has changed?
Oh, Cove, I'm on your ass.
How do I tell my girl that I'm not gonna be able to make it?
Robert Keller, Atmos, Fat Boy.
How do I tell my
we going
girl
live
that
tomorrow
I'm sorry,
together.
that I'm sorry, baby, but I
Thank you so
just
much, Nick.
can't, no. Tell me, how do I look her in her face and have the nerve to say that I'm not ready for my wedding day? My mother know my mother, and it's all good.
My brother know my brother.
We all grew up in the hood. My cousins cool with my cousins. All of our friends, grandma friends. How could I let this end when it's supposed to be a family?
Hey Diva, where you at?
Under her and me, yeah. And I never meant to go and waste her time or ruin her life. I got a bad case of butterflies. Somebody help me.
107 chat, my Sinful with the people. Shout out to Sinful P.
How do I tell my girl?
One of the real ones.
Something has changed within me. How do I tell
I hope when I go to Chicago I get to meet him.
I'm not gonna be able to make it. Going away. Thank
you so much, J-Rock.
How do I tell her that I'm sorry, baby, but I just can't?
LJ, hey.
Tell me, how do I look her in her face? Have the nerve to say I'm not ready.
Hell yeah.
My wedding day. How do I tell my girl
this is the worst
something came up in the plans has that I ever had to do? How do I tell
when I know
my
that
girl
she don't deserve it?
I'm not gonna be able to make it. I'm
But
going
I'm
away.
so confused.
How do I tell
That part
my
right there,
girl
Prima Donna.
that I'm
No,
sorry,
help
baby,
me
but I
to
just
make a decision right now.
Tell me, how do I look her in her face and have the nerve to say I'm not ready on our wedding day?
You know what? That's a good thing, LaMarcus. That's a good thing, LaMarcus. In my opinion, it don't even make it to trial. Dana, they don't have none before they get exposed. They will acquit him on all charges. Facts. Truth never lost a battle. It always prevails. That part right there. Oh man, Ben, I'm glad you said that. Man, that's motivation to me. We on y'all ass like white on rice, Oak Cove. Yeah. Oak Cove, what y'all think? I peeped in when I was going to Tox channel. Diva was over there reading the Azriel motion. No, don't read Azriel motion, Diva. I want to know why you think Robert guilty after Jenny from the block just showed y'all why he not. I mean, why he is. I'm sorry. When Jenny from the block just showed y'all why he is innocent. Put it like that. Uh-huh. Hold on. I'm going and see what they talking about. I'm gonna go ahead and see what Tox talking about. Hold on. We gonna do it like this. We gonna do it like this. Let's see what Tox talking about, y'all.
Sufficient to demonstrate criminally, recognizing that there may be some uncertainty as to the precise demarcation between persuasion, which is criminalized, and asking, which is not. Keeping with this pattern of rewriting statutes, the government suggests that it need only to prove that the defendant caused Jane and Faith to travel to meet him to sustain the charge. The government relies on a 1959, excuse me, a 1959 case from the Fourth Circuit that interpreted the now defunct version of the Mann Act that was historically used by the government to prosecute Black men who had relationships with white women. The current iteration of the Mann Act does not contain the caused language like the 1958 version did. Moreover, the discussed in detail infra harms actually stands for proposition that the government must provide specific proof of persuasion to sustain its burden. The government's reliance on harms is misplaced. Contrary to the government's claims, it was required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant persuaded, induced,
Right,
or
Dennis.
coerced Jane Azriel to travel to California, not merely asked her. The government's evidence is wanting. The court must acquit the defendant of the Mann Act violation and all others. Bitch, now you had a point right there. Now you had a point right there. Oh, bitch. Oh, shit, bitch. You got a motherfucking point right there. That's not a good charge. That bitch was lying. That's not a cool charge, dog. Not okay. You got a motherfucking point right there. Okay, something is wrong with Azriel Clary and her parents. And that's why you see, yeah, they was planning it the whole time. What's up, Dana? They was planning it the entire time. This girl was living in her house, in this man's house, as a part of a scheme and plan to set this man up to be in the position that he's in today. That girl, no wonder she can't get a job and she out there prostituting in Dubai. She got nothing good coming to her. You don't do people like that. You have got to be effing kidding me, Azriel. You're worse than I thought. And your parents are disgusting. No wonder you're like that. Look where you come from. Ugh. That's disgusting. This nigga about to get out. Right. That's crazy. He gonna be free on the streets fighting his other trial, bitch. Fucking with these stupid ass people. What in the hizel? Hell to the nizal. Okay. Wow. All right. New York penal law. Let me see. Hold on. Let me go down. So we had New York penal law. Let me see how much more I got to read. I'm getting tired. All right. Where we go? That's public health. All right. I'm about to read like 3 of these pages flat out with no commentary. All right. The government charged the defendant with violation of the Mann Act as to faith, based on the theory that he committed the offenses of reckless endangerment when he had unprotected sex with her in New York without disclosing that he suffered from genital herpes. The government again rehashes its excessive herpes testimony, insisting that a reasonable jury could easily conclude from the trial evidence that the defendant created a substantial risk of physical injury when he had unprotected sex with Faith. Taking the government's evidence in its best light, it failed to prove that when the defendant had sex with Faith, he created a substantial risk of physical injury. First, because Faith was not afflicted with herpes and did not testify that she observed any evidence that the defendant had an active infection. The only reasonable inference to draw is that the defendant did not have any type of outbreak when he and Faith had sex in New York. The government insists that this fact is irrelevant, but whether the defendant was engaged in unprotected sex while suffering from an active infection or during a period when he had no symptoms is entirely relevant to his state of mind and relevant to the issue of whether he acted recklessly. Surely, the government would argue that it is more reckless and the risk of harm is more substantial if the defendant had unprotected sex with Faith during an active outbreak. Thus, the question of whether Faith was infected with herpes in New York is relevant to the defendant's state of mind and whether he acted with the with the intent, God damn it, with the intention to give her herpes. Furthermore, the government's evidence simply did not prove that there was substantial risk of death or serious physical injury. As argued at great length in the defendant's opening memorandum of law, the government's herpes experts testified at length about rare complications of herpes that arguably will qualify as serious physical injury. But unless those risks were substantial, the government cannot meet its burden. Since the risk of serious physical injury associated with herpes is low rather than substantial risk, the government failed to prove reckless endangerment. For the reasons fleshed out in the defendant's opening memorandum, New York State public law is unconstitutional. It fails to define infected, while the government and this court assumes that infected means carrying the virus rather than having the ability to transmit it. No authority supports this interpretation. Such an interpretation would lead to arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, as it did in this case. As a reminder, the government can point to no case in which an individual was charged with a violation of public health law, whereas the accused did not even transmit a disease to the alleged victim. The government argues that it was permitted to charge the defendant, R. Kelly, with a repeal statute and rewrite it so that it would pass constitutional muster. Unsurprisingly, the government has no authority to support its view that it can take up the role of a California legislator. For unknown reasons, the government relies on a 1978 case out of the Third Circuit that fails to support its claims that it has the authority to charge and prosecute repealed statutes and to further step into the shoes of lawmakers and rewrite statutes to its liking. The government also inexplicably cites a case, United States versus Bonano, which considered rather a certain charge violated the ex post facto clause, since the alleged conduct occurred prior to the enactment of the statute. The issue raised here is different.
Right, Ben.
The question before this court is rather the government was permitted to charge a version of the statute that did not exist at the time of this prosecution.
Facts, Big Vi.
The United States Supreme Court answered that question in the negative. The government points to this court to no competent authority demonstrating that the equated version of the California public health law may be kept alive. As such, the government had no authority to charge and prosecute R. Kelly under a repeal and inoperative statute. You got a motherfucking point there. You got a motherfucking point. You got a motherfucking point there. How you gonna charge somebody with something? If he was having an outbreak at the time and had sex with her, yes, that is a health risk. If he's not having an outbreak, a disease can't be transmitted, and she didn't catch it at the time. She only found out he had the shit later. No. And not only that, not y'all changing the motherfucking law in the middle of the trial, and you didn't, and it wasn't like that when this shit started. No, it's a no for me on that one. I don't know what they're doing down there. Okay. All right. Next, NECKXS. Next, Racketeering Act 5, Mann Act violation, Geronda. I particularly don't like Geronda because she chased after him in a courthouse when she should have had her fast ass at school. Like, how can you say somebody did some shit to you? Your ass is sitting there at a court case. This man don't even fucking know you. And you're chasing him around in and out of court. Take your ass to school. Where was your parents? Arrest them too.
Right, bro.
Ass heifer. Got the nerve to be sitting up there crying. Shut your ass up. Okay? And Geronda also said after she testified that she regretted the testimony. By the way, okay? Elsie said, Summer Bunny said Faith already had herpes. Child. Okay. All right. We don't do promotion of other channels on my channel, Republica. Don't do that. You don't know who I'm beefing with. You don't know what's good. Don't do that. I'll be right back. Give me 2 seconds. I need to blow my nose. I'm not going nowhere. I'm just right here. Okay, take your fast ass, Geronda Pace, to motherfucking school. All right? I don't know who the hell you think you are to be out of school and with a fake ass, DanaJay said he got that receipt with a fake ass ID okay, and got the nerve to be chasing this man down like you're a grown ass woman. I can't. Get the fuck out of here. Like, no. All right. The government expresses some confusion over defendant's interstate commerce argument. To be clear, the defendant R. Kelly did expressly argue that purely intrastate use of cell phones does not constitute use of a facility of interstate commerce. The defendant did more than vaguely suggest this argument, as the government contends in footnote 28. The defendant cited authority to support the proposition.
Oscars.
And furthermore acknowledge a Second Circuit case that arguably conflicted with Gonzalez. The issue is properly preserved and presented to this court. If the court would like additional briefing on this issue or the many other raised in the defendant's Rule 29 motion, it certainly has the authority to order it. If it wasn't clear enough, the defendant argued in the alternative that even if interstate cell phone use does satisfy the commerce clause requirement in some circumstances, it did not do so here. The government showed only that Geronda and the defendant sometimes communicated by cell phone. The date and nature of those communications are unknown. The government asked the jury to assume that the defendant enticed or coerced her. Now, that's a motherfucking lie. That is reverse predatoriness. That girl came to him. I'm sorry, I don't give a damn. Some of these heifers are fast as hell. Okay? Y'all better look at these kids and how they are today. That motherfucker came to him. He had no clue who that girl was. She was in a sexual trial as a little girl with a fake ID. Don't fucking try me on this one. I do not like that girl. I do not like that shit. You gotta be fucking kidding me. That shit is not cool that she would even sit up there and act like she's a victim. And not only that, she bought Dominique Garner over there, knowing that they were underage and lying about their fucking age. Bitch, please. The hell? No, I don't care. I don't care. I don't like it. So, the date was unknown. The government asked the jury to assume that he persuaded Geronda to engage in prohibited sexual activity during their cell phone communications without providing the communications or even eliciting testimony from Geronda about what the communication was about. The government routinely attempted to avoid nexus requirements and must be reminded that the government was required to show that defendant used the cell phone to commit the specific prohibited act, namely to induce or coerce Geronda to engage in unlawful sexual behavior. The government cannot satisfy that burden by generally showing that the defendant defendant and Geronda sometimes communicated by cell phone and that on some unrelated occasions they engaged in unlawful sexual activity. The language used in those communications to the extent they existed is important for determining whether the defendant induced or persuaded or enticed or coerced or merely just asked Geronda, which would be insufficient to demonstrate criminality. While the government cites some authorities to support its contention that interstate commerce can be established by intrastate cell phone use, none of the cases cited by the government condone asking a jury to assume the content of a communication as the government did in this case. In the United States versus Vickers, the defendant was charged with a violation with a 2242 violation, not a violation under 2242B. The Vickers court was never faced with the question of whether the government can satisfy the burden of proof without ever introducing communications that it claims constituted persuasion, enticement, coercion, nor was Vickers court faced with an interstate commerce question. Acknowledging the problems with its proof, the government relies on Bloomingfield versus United States, a 60-year-old case out of the 8th Circuit that interpreted the repealed and outdated Mann Act statute. That aside, Bloomfield involved a defendant arranging for a prostitute, Miss Tollefson, to cross state lines for the purpose of prostitution, where the evidence showed that the defendant telephoned Miss Tollefson for the precise purpose of hiring her to cross state lines to engage in prostitution in exchange for money. It's no surprise that a jury concluded that the defendant used a cell phone to induce Miss Tollefson across state lines for prostitution. In contrast, here, Geronda testified that she had a sexual relationship with the defendant that was carried out entirely in the state of Illinois. She did not describe herself as a prostitute and admitted that she went to parties at his home, hung out there for extended periods of time, and even went to his home when he wasn't there. Although the government offered general evidence through Geronda's testimony that Geronda and defendants sometimes communicated by cell phone, it failed to prove that the defendant used that phone to persuade, induce, or coerce Geronda into lawful sexual activity. The government's proofs were insufficient as to Racketeering Act 5. Let me tell y'all something. Ain't nobody have to induce her. That motherfucker was already there. Man, shut the fuck up with that. Ain't nobody have to induce or entice her ass to go nowhere. She was already there. He didn't have no knowledge. Here she go. And got the nerve years later to be sitting in court like she wasn't a fast-ass teenager. You were. The fuck was you doing at them parties? What the fuck was you doing at that courthouse with fake IDs? What were you doing? You're a fast-ass bitch, and you got the nerve to be sitting up crying over some shit. Girl, bye. Okay? A Racketeering Act 9. Go get some fucking therapy. Racketeering Act 9.
God.
Azriel Clary, Jane. Oh, God. That shit with Geronda really pisses me off. I mean, there is active proof that this girl went after R. Kelly rigorously.
Right, Jules? That's how I
lied
feel.
about her age and some more shit. Like, and he was young at that time. Like, he wasn't old like he is now.
He was
like,
hot.
what the fuck are you talking about?
I hear you calling. Here
Racketeering Act 9, Azriel Clary. In response to the defendant's claim that the government failed to prove that the defendant took any action to induce, persuade, entice, or coerce Azriel to travel to California between September and October 2015, the government again relies on the pitiful 1959 Fourth Circuit case Harm versus the United States, claiming that the inducement simply means to cause her to come across the states. Harms does not stand for the proposition of the government that the government contends. Indeed, Harms supports the defendant's argument. In Harms, the question at issue was whether the government proved that the defendant directed or knew that the victim would travel by common carrier. The victim had previously worked for the defendant as a prostitute after having a conversation with the defendant. She traveled across state lines by interstate airlines carrier and thereafter engaged in acts of prostitution, which in establishments maintained by the defendant, which prostitution, okay. Evidence that the defendant had induced the victim to travel for those purposes of prostitution was ample. However, in R. Kelly's case, the defendant argued that the government's evidence was insufficient to show that the defendant either directed or knew that the victim would travel by common carrier. The Fourth Circuit concluded that it was not essential for the government to show that the defendant directed or knew that the victim would travel by interstate carrier. The court reasoned that because the government proved inducement, the fact of the resultant trip by interstate carrier was sufficient to justify a conviction under 22422. The court held it was not necessary for the government to go further and attempt to show that Harms, the defendant, we still talking about Harms, that Harms knowingly caused the victim to travel by common carrier either by direction or knowledge that the victim would use that mode of transportation. Cause is a word of very broad import, and its meaning is generally known. The knowing persuasion to make the interstate trip, of course, must be shown with some degree of particularity. But once the knowing persuasion has been shown, if the trip by interstate carrier follows, the offense is complete. Contrary to the government's argument, harms does not hold that inducement or persuasion means cause. Quite the contrary. Harms makes clear the government must show persuasion to make a trip with some degree of particularity. The court merely noted that once the government proves persuasion, it is not required to separately show that the defendant knew how the victim would travel. Okay. So just okay, I get that. Did y'all get that? Did y'all understand that? So if the defendant is proven to have shown some type of coercion or persuasion, it doesn't matter if he knew how she was gonna get there, long as the bitch got there. You feel me? Okay, and we're talking about Harms and his prostitute right now, and we're using this as an example because they use other cases for their arguments. Here, the government. Now we back to R. Kelly's case. The government did not demonstrate persuasion, inducement, or coercion. Azriel offered no testimony to suggest that she was coerced or enticed into traveling into California in the fall of 2015. The record shows that Jane was desperate to return to R. Kelly after he sent her home, and she was eager to travel with him. Jane's testimony about the defendant's rules and sexual proclivities during this period are not sufficient evidence of coercion to travel, even if Jane now believes, with the benefit of hindsight, that the defendant's conduct was controlling. Forced labor and racketeering acts. The government contends that Geronda's act of giving oral sex to R. Kelly on one occasion in January of 2010 was an act of forced labor. What? Wait. Hold up. Wait. Huh? Bitch, I know you're fucking lying. My face dry as hell, y'all. Sorry. So her giving me head is an act of forced labor. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay. Well, all right then. No. Okay. As set forth in detail in defendant's opening memorandum of law, the forced labor statute was not intended to punish isolated acts of abuse. But even if it was, the government did not show the nexus between a physical assault and a sexual act. Man, what the fuck are they talking about? Forced labor is like when you have a bunch of people working in a factory. What the fuck are they talking about? Damn, he got played bad. I'm sorry. He just really did. Taken in its best light, the government offered evidence that on one occasion, Geronda threatened to punish. I think they mean R. Kelly threatened to punish Geronda for breaking into his home and physically assaulted her on a separate occasion because she failed to show him proper respect. Geronda did not testify. Y'all see, she done broke into the man's home. Come on now. Geronda did not testify that the physical assault was intended to force her to perform oral sex on the defendant. This evidence falls painfully short of the proof of the offense of forced labor. Geronda could have testified that she gave the defendant oral sex because he threatened her or because she feared he might assault her. But those words never came out of her mouth. Random acts of violence plus a sex act does not equate to forced labor. The government should not be permitted to warp statutes beyond recognition simply because it seeks to punish isolated acts of abuse that occurred decades ago. Similarly, the government did not prove that Jane engaged in group sex acts because she was forced to. Jane's hindsight testimony that she did not want to participate in this conduct was not proof.
Exactly, Prima. I'm gonna talk about it tomorrow.
The government cannot establish the offense of forced labor by simply showing that the defendant and Jane had a sexual relationship that some might consider abusive. The government was required to establish a causal link between the group sex acts and the threats of physical violence. It failed to do so. Finally, no rational juror could conclude based on the evidence adduced at trial that defendant knowingly obtained or agreed to obtain any labor or services from Faith on January 13, 2018. As discussed, the forced labor statute was not intended to reach isolated conduct like that described by Faith. Faith never testified that she felt forced to perform oral sex on the defendant. Not wanting to have oral sex is not the same as being forced to engage in it. Furthermore, Faith admitted proudly that she was not a victim and made a choice to be involved with R. Kelly. When she was displeased with the relationship, she walked away. The government's infantilization of Faith and quest to redefine her experience as forced labor is offensive to women who actually lived in conditions of servitude, the harm that the forced labor statute was designed to address. For the foregoing reasons, this court must acquit the defendant of all forced labor convictions. Conclusion: for the foregoing reasons, this court should enter an order acquitting defendant of all offenses. Damn. Damn. Damn, damn, damn. Dang. Damn, 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 dang. No, for real though. Oh my God. I kind of regret saying that this wasn't a good lawyer. I kind of do. I kind of do now. Because actually, in hindsight, this lawyer did her motherfucking thing. This lawyer actually did the damn thing with a couple of certain things that I would have reworded differently. And I'm no lawyer, so that's probably what it is. I think there were some very, oh wow, like that. I'm wowed. I'm shocked. That was very specific, to the point. That was a lot, and it was Yusuf. It was factual. It was very, oh man, that was good. I can't even fucking lie. That was good, y'all. That was fucking good, man. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we might see this might make a huge difference. Depending on, so my question is, and I probably should get like somebody like Dennis Byron or somebody up here, is so my question would be, is the same judge that handled the original case, is that the same judge that's going to handle his request for acquittal? That would be my major question at this point, and I'm going to find that out and do an update to this video. I thought that was so good and so well the way that was put. I actually regret, like I said, I regret saying that he never had a good attorney. I think that yes, Bridgerton. Now, I don't think he's a perfect man. I think he made some mistakes, but this shit was bull. That was bullshit. And this lawyer, this attorney was able to point it out so plainly and so clearly and use valid arguments, and that was wonderful. I mean, I must admit, I'm very shocked at the fact that, and it's like not only are you a lawyer that you can see these things, but I'm not even a lawyer, and now that you've explained them, I can see this very clearly. I think that this man might have a chance. I really do at this point. But all right, y'all, that was my Azriel Clary exclusive and my document read from the acquittal request from 4/4/2022, which was yesterday for the East Coasters. Woo-wee. All right, y'all, let me know what y'all thought about this video. I will be doing an update as soon as I find out a little bit more information. Also, I'm going to make a simple version of this video, so it's going to be a lot shorter, a lot straighter to the point. Thank you, Kimberly. I always like when y'all give me my compliments after I do my thing. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, Yusuf. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you, Jessica. Level Up, Bridget, Dana, LC. So many of you guys, Little Mac, Vanessa, Edgar, Dee Dee, Rada, Kai Ashford, Hebo. Did I say Lil Mac? Essence, Rosetta Brooks, and Tierra, Keena Jefferson, so much more. Reality Check, Bree Edwards, Essence, Troll Farm Boogie. Thank you guys, Kai Ashford and Gwenium. Yeah, I remember it was Gwenium. Mimi Love, and just so many of you guys. Miss Riona, that came, and Susan D. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Donagu, right? Mick Hicks, Alicia Norwood, Dominique Wheeler, Bridget Jenkins. Thank y'all for rocking with me. Demita, to my mods, Demita, Yusuf, and all my other mods that joined the channel for this video. Thank you so much. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a short version of the video with specifically the receipts, less commentary, and no document read. Thank you so much. Good night.
Well, I guess Tox got tired. I tried to text her and tell her that it wasn't over. But I guess
I hope you're ready to sweat. Grab a clipboard, pen, and fill in your name and email.
Yewande, a fitness instructor, uses Staples.com to find the right supplies for her business at the right price.
Here we go.
No, we ain't. So, what do y'all think is going to happen? What do y'all think is going to happen? What do y'all think is going to happen? Willie act like he don't know nobody. I think it's going to be dismissed. The lawyer did a good job. Miss Bonjean did a great job. Facts. I hope they use the law and acquit. Right. I truly hope so. Let's see who in here. Let's see. New trial. What up, Coop? What up, Dennis? I hope it get overturned. Me too. Ann has some decisions to make. New trial for sure, but it's not a stretch to dismiss. Thanks, Elvira Ward. I believe the same thing. It's not a stretch to dismiss. I hope they use the law to quit. Yep. Miss Lady T, come on now. The lawyer did a good job. Did a great job. Yeah. If Ann denied this, it clearly corruption. Yeah. Yeah. Y'all see what happened to Witchcom judge today, right? And she got raised up today to a Ghislaine Maxwell's judge. She got raised up to appellate court. So she's no longer in district court. Dismiss, he coming home, yo. She, the judge, was wrong for not addressing them lying on the stand. Facts. They should have been impeached And they should have been locked up. Coop in the building. Hey, Tony. Can you tell me why they will call Jane Doe and John Doe? Isn't that what they call? Isn't that what the coroners call the body that the unidentified and the county court officer? Okay, Dennis, let me break that down for you. Yes, that is what the coroner call it, but it also signifies jurisdiction for the government. John Doe and Jane Doe goes back to persons. Let me show you. Let me break it down to you. Hold on. Let me show you. Here it is. There we go. Put that right there. Let me show you. There we go. Here we go. Get out of the way. All right, here we go. See, John Does and Jane Does are persons, which is created by the state. They're technically dead in their entity. They fall under the jurisdiction of codes and acts. They're under government jurisdiction. They're 14th Amendment slave. They live in a public. They are fiction, and they possessed by an entity. So, Dennis, here's your answer. They created by the state. And that's what a dead person is. A John Doe. A dead a man, right here, would either be John. Pseudonym names don't go with them. Last names, you can't have a last name to somebody that you haven't identified yet. So they would either call it John or Jane if their paperwork signifies that they are a man instead of a person. And plus, it has something to do with funds, as it always do. Dennis, you be missing my classes, man. I'm going to start going back teaching them, but I would love to see you there, Dennis. I ain't going to lie to you, because you be having some good questions. That's where we taking this at. They gonna try to pull some sugar honey iced tea. Man, it'll be an uprising. Willie Jones, Tasha K had 5 days to take down her videos of Cardi B. Are you serious? She got 5 days? Well, look, I love everybody that's here. I love all the Dream Team members. I love all the mods. I love the visitors. I love everybody. Look, we going at it, I want to say 1 o'clock tomorrow. I got a meeting at 10. So when I get out my meeting, I'm coming back here and we going at it again. And we got some stuff to look at. We got some stuff to look at. All right? So I love every last one of y'all. Let's get up out of here and pray for everybody's safekeepings. DanaJay out of here. Y'all be blessed. Love every last one of y'all. Peace.
Swimming in you. Hey, little mama. Said I wanna take her. Dip in your pool. Just go for a little dive, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.